clicking.
All right. And we are live. Welcome back to our team and to viewers for our second Pride Month Instagram Live. Some of our second Instagram Lives ever. Um, we're just getting all of our tech set up. So Michael is going to give me the nod when we are like, oh, there it is. All right. Hello, Instagram audience, TikTok audience, anyone viewing this, welcome. Happy Pride. It is still June. We are still something under the LGBTQIA plus umbrella. For all of us that may be different some things. But I know I'm excited about those some things. And today we are going to talk about kind of getting the most out of Pride, and particularly like thinking about going out to different events. At Pride, next week we'll talk about all sorts of other ways to do Pride that maybe don't include going to stuff. So for those of you who are homebodies like me, stay tuned for next week. But this, like maybe everyone on this live, we've got lots of experts to share ideas. But this week we wanted to talk about, going to Pride events, and those are often a big part of June for some people, or their Pride events later in the year for some of us who live in hot climates. And we know that people might be attending. Maybe this year is your first Pride, or your first Pride with identities and labels that you're holding now. It may be your 50th Pride. You might be going to events that are super crowded or small events, ones that involve drinking or dancing or indoors or outdoors. And we know that a lot of us in trans and non-binary communities have histories of trauma experiences, have a wide variety of sensory needs. And so we really just wanted to think about, like, what are some of the ways that we can get the most out of going to Pride events? Some of the considerations people might want to keep in mind. And I believe that Christina is going to start us off with some thoughts.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a content creator here at Forge. I love Pride. I don't necessarily love going around people. I'm a stay-at-home and avoid people person more than a people person. But when I do go out, I always have a plan. I spent the week before this year's Pride Festival in Milwaukee looking at the calendar, looking up at the lineup, knowing what I wanted to hit on each stage, so that I went in with a plan, and it was a little less overwhelming that way.
And Christina, you had mentioned also thinking about the different sizes of events, and do you want to say anything about that?
You had. It's, there are certain Pride events that are huge. Milwaukee is setting records for attendance every year, and I love to see that, but it's also very, very scary to someone who doesn't like being in crowds. It's something I've never enjoyed doing. So I've started also tracking the small Pride festivals that are happening in the smaller communities around me, because they're popping up, they're multiplying, there's so many. And I know that in those instances, it's going to be 50 or 100 people, not 30,000. And that's a lot more manageable for me. I can relax in those situations because I'm not so overwhelmed by so many people. And then I get to have more one-on-one interactions with vendors and providers and such. So there are so many beautiful resources that can be found and enjoyed at the smaller Pride Fests that we don't often get to take advantage of at the bigger ones.
Chris, one of the things that you just mentioned made me think about something that we hadn't really talked about before this, which is like, for those of us who are on our 50th Pride or are aging or might have hearing issues or any of those things, like those smaller Pride events can really be places where we can like actually actually hear the people that are talking to us, which is really difficult, even if we have great hearing in those really large events that have the dance music booming and the hundreds of people all around us. So there's some really good benefits of having those more intimate settings when they happen, and if you can find them near you.
That, and I think they just feel so much more community-based because it is local organizations, it's local vendors. It's a lot less corporate when it's the smaller venues, and that's something that I truly enjoy.
Yeah. And I appreciate that reminder too, that like one of the things we might be getting out of Pride is just like getting to know different organizations in the area. We may also be getting to know, new people that we see around, or like getting to know ourselves. But often there are a lot of organizations that have tables, and that's a chance to like learn about them, lower stakes, to kind of check them out and get a feel for what that organization is like. And then, maybe follow up if they're a provider that you want care with. Depending on the Pride, there are of course like different rules for who can be vendors and stuff. And being at Pride doesn't guarantee that provider is going to be the best fit for you. But it's a place to say, oh, who's here? What kind of stuff do I want to look for? So I like that, thinking about, that's another thing we might get out of it, is not just like the cool stickers, but also like, oh, hey, I do need this service, or I do want to check this out.
And it's a great place to find out which of your local businesses and such might be LGBT friendly or LGBT owned. Because when you live in smaller communities like I do, I sometimes avoid shopping small just because I don't know what the experience is going to be. And when I see businesses at these small Pride Fests, or even just sponsoring a booth, I know that that's a place that I can go and feel safe.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And
go ahead, Emil.
I was going to shift it to you, Michael.
Okay, fine. I was going to make a comment before we like shifted to a different topic, but like, when we were talking about this ahead of time, we were kind of talking about like, Chris, you were talking about Milwaukee's Pride, which is huge. And I mentioned, I have gone to this really small Pride that's up in the middle of nowhere land, where the population of the city is like 9,000 people. And they don't have a lot of, queer or trans organizations, but they have local businesses. And it was like, it felt like it was home. Because it was the people of the community. And by that, I meant the community, like of the people who live in that city. So it was both really celebratory for queer people and trans people, but it was also like, we're all in this together. We're coming together as a geographic small city community. So those can be really fun. Really, really fun. So Emil, if I can pick up on what Chris started with, Chris, you mentioned something about kind of like knowing before you go. And I always think about the TSA when I say that, like, know before you go, or whatever those phrases are. But I think for many of us, especially for trauma survivors, it can be really scary to go to places, especially if we haven't been to that, like a venue before, or if we've never been to Pride before. We don't know kind of what the deal is. But one of the really cool things that most of us know is that you can find out a lot of information online. You can find out what kinds of rules or restrictions there might be. Can you bring a backpack in? Do you have to show ID when you like get your ticket to go in? Do you have to do some of these things that are now really common, like go through metal detectors or empty your pockets, or are you going to get patted down, or can you bring in things like fidget toys, or are those not allowed? So like knowing those things ahead of time allows for people to make some conscious choices about, hey, is this a good fit for me or not? People can also do things like check about, hey, is there a map of whatever the grounds are, whether it's a small Pride or a big Pride? Are there going to be bathrooms there that feel comfortable and accessible? And that could be all gender bathrooms. It could be, are there single stall bathrooms? It can be, are they physically accessible? Or are they porta potties that like, you can't get into if you have mobility aids? So like knowing some of those things ahead of time can really, really make a big difference in deciding whether or not we go, or if we need to make some adjustments to how we get there, or what we do when we are there.
I just wanted
Do
to.
you have thoughts?
Oh no, Christina, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go. Sorry.
I don't know. I just wanted to kind of touch on that because, the Pride events don't always have the most comprehensive websites, but the venues, the parks, they do. So if you can't find what you're looking for through the organization that's hosting the Pride event itself, look at the venue's website, because that's going to be super helpful in planning out your day.
And
Good point.
if there's anyone on watching this that organizes Pride events, these are some things that people are trying to look up ahead of time. So it's great to include that access information on your website. And I've heard, in bigger cities, there are some places that are doing a lot in terms of access. I've heard, I haven't seen this myself, but like Seattle Pride has a disability tent, like a spoomy tent that's low sensory input and a place for rest, and has had that for years. And so that's something that other prides can consider doing too, is having different places throughout. If you have a kind of festival grounds versus a parade, like have places that are quiet, or make sure there's seating around for bodies of different sizes, things like that. I also wanted to highlight, like, it can be kind of overwhelming to plan ahead and feel like, oh, I'm thinking about all the things that might go wrong and I'm planning for those. But for me, I found it really helpful to plan it also in terms of the positive. Like, this type of planning helps me get the most out of the day. It helps, maybe it helps me to like think up through my anxiety and decrease the likelihood of a panic attack. Maybe it is in terms of my disability, and it's going to give me the rest that I need so that I can feel more present. And there are ways to like make some of this fun. Like buddy up. Like, Pride events are a great time to be like, hey person, I want to get to know better. Do you want to be at this place at the same time? Or good friend, please go to this with me. And you having a friend there also helps with safety. It's maybe somebody to enter into the area with you if your pride is somewhere where there are protesters around, to have that safety, or somebody to like walk back to your transportation afterwards, or get back to your transportation afterwards, so that you don't feel like you have to be alone during those times. You can, if you don't have anyone in person, virtually cheering each other on, like texting friends where you're going to be and when, can be fun, because you can like celebrate all the cool stuff that's happening around you, and it has that added element of safety of somebody knowing where you are. I also, I've been thinking a lot about like how playfulness and curiosity and exploration can be really healing, and like being sassy can be really healing. So this all kind of goes together. One concrete example, our last live, the video on a platform, somebody made some like nasty comment about fat people. And so today I was like, I'm going to wear my fat roles, not gender roles t-shirt to be on our live, because like fat people are great. And it's a good, like, reminder to myself and to like our audience that like fat phobia sucks. And so those kind of sassy things are things that we can do at Pride too. Like, maybe it is wearing your queerest outfit. Maybe there's a gender expression that like you haven't done in public. And the thing about larger Pride events is they might give you some anonymity to play with that in a way that feels less vulnerable. Because like everybody is out there in whatever outfit. So maybe this is your chance to be your like most fabulous dressed up self. Maybe this is a chance to be your most like undressed up, unfancy. I like haven't taken a shower in a week, but like you know, these pajamas got washed in the last month kind of outfit, like that's fine too. Like it gives you that chance to just like be who you need to be and to play with who you need to be. And I think getting to do that can be really, really healing for a lot of people. It's not right for everybody, but when we have those opportunities, it can be really good.
Okay, I love that you said that, Emil, because after years of only going to Pride in drag, this year I went in shorts and a t-shirt, and I had the best time I've ever had in my life.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm often like, sometimes I'm like, I need everybody to know how gay I am and how cute I am. And it's like, actually, I just want to be there. So like, I'm gonna be slovenly, but it gets me there.
Yeah, I mean, this year my Pride outfit was a t-shirt that said, "This is what trans looks like." You know, and that was plenty. I was seen, I did my, you know, I was able to just be me. No putting on a character, no, you know. And sometimes me that day was pretty silly. I got to, you know, just play.
Yeah. Yeah. That's we have in our notes like the phrase "be gentle with yourself," and that really comes to mind in this of like that playfulness and that planning. Like it's all a way to be gentle with ourselves and to show care for ourselves. And so kind of that follows into, you know, at Forge, we do a lot of work with survivors, people who have experienced or maybe currently experiencing sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and other forms of violence and harm. And in those situations, there may be additional considerations about going to Pride, additional safety planning people want to do. Michael, maybe let's start with you of what are, in addition to what we've talked about, what are some things that are specific around survivors and those types of violence that folks may want to consider?
Yeah, I think, you know, some of it was already mentioned, which is kind of like the buddy up, make a plan. Those are always good things to think about. I think it's always great to make sure that you have the phone numbers or the textable numbers of the people that you feel you can reach out to. Because, you know, sometimes just making like a text to somebody, even if they're not there, can really help you feel more grounded or feel more safe or feel like, hey, they can come and get me if I need to be like, you know, not medevaced out, but like, you know, if I don't want to be on public transportation, they'll come and pick me up. So just having those numbers handy can be really, really important. I was also thinking about like, you know, sometimes we want to go together as a group to Pride. And I know all three of us are very introverted and, you know, we may or may not want to go with other people, but sometimes if we choose to go with people, we don't have to like go everywhere with those people. So as trauma survivors, we can say, hey, let's meet up at this, you know, water fountain or this place, this tree every half an hour, and let's just check in with each other. And that kind of like touchstone can be really important for survivors and for anybody, just to say, okay, you know, we're going to check in. We're going to see how we're doing. If we need to go, we'll go. If we need to stay, we'll stay. Maybe we'll hang out together. Maybe we'll do something together, whatever. But just to have that planned out ahead of time. And that's just one example of how people can, you know, set a time and a place to check in with each other. I think one of the more challenging things is if you know that an abuser might be there, a former partner who was abusive, or someone else in the community who's been known to be an offender of some kind, is to think around how do we plan to, you know, what if we see or hear or have a direct interaction with them? And everybody is different about how they want to make a plan around that. But it can be really good to think ahead about what we might want to do. And Emil, I don't know if you want to make some additional layers of comments to that, because, you know, we live in small communities sometimes and we see people that are have been harmful in the past.
Absolutely. One of the big things I was thinking about in terms of that is like doing a little bit of a risk assessment ahead of time. So risk assessments really go with safety planning, and for, you know, sometimes they're like professionals use them, but like for us regular people. Risk assessment is thinking about like, what are the possible risks from something happening? And then with those possible risks in mind, like what do I want to do with that information? How does that impact, like, okay, this is a risk I can tolerate. This is a risk that I need to completely avoid ever getting into. This is a risk that like I need some additional preparation for, but like there's ways around it. So, a specific example would be seeing someone who's caused harm in the past. My risk assessment might be, this is going to be a trauma reminder, and I, may cause like these emotional reactions for me. And I don't think that person will physically hurt me if I see them. So that's one set of risks. Another set of risks is, there's somebody that like I am afraid that they'll physically hurt me if I see them, or somebody, people who are experiencing stalking, maybe trying to keep their location a secret, keep someone from being able to know, what kind of transportation they use or things like that. And so they have a different set of risks they have to navigate in that situation. And then with that in mind of like, well, what happens if I see this person? Then I can think about my safety. If I'm going to have a big emotional response, I want to think about what's my emotional safety? Who can help me with grounding? Who can help me move away from that situation? If I'm am I a flight or fight person? Like, who's gonna keep me from, from getting in an argument? Maybe if that's not going to increase my safety to do. If there's like some level of stalking or following, somebody trying to track your location, then you might want to think about things like having, like not using your standard form of transportation to get there. So that if somebody does watch you leave, they don't see your license plate number, they don't recognize your bicycle, they don't know your normal bus route home. So those are different kinds of safety strategies, and just thinking through like what really those are for you ahead of time, and who you can talk to them about. It may mean brainstorming with like a crisis line ahead of time, and then only telling the person you're going with a little bit of information. Again, we have small communities, so some of us don't always tell the people we're in person with all of the details. And that was a big thing that I was thinking about, is to add to the safety planning aspect.
And when I know a lot of us choose not to involve authority figures, whether that be law enforcement or security, but sometimes, if something escalates at a Pride event, usually there is some kind of security at Pride events, even if it's a small event. I mean, I think that that's something that people may want to think about ahead of time of, hey, if something gets escalated, do I want to know where the security tent is, that I can go either for safety or to ask that somebody maybe be escorted out. And I know that's kind of pushing the extreme end of things, whereas I think a lot of times what interactions we're having are maybe verbal or maybe even just line of sight interactions. But sometimes we can involve other people, even if we don't know who they are, to help de-escalate a situation.
And even like, I know so many people are not comfortable with anything resembling law enforcement, and security level, are pretty similar in their approaches. If there's like a medic tent, sometimes there's a kind of like health and wellness tent that's like, here's where the free water is, or the Band-Aids. Like, that's another place, that's kind of calmer. You can go. If there's a lot of vendors, like, go to the domestic violence organization. Like, I need to chill out here for a little bit. That could be, an option. So like looking around for other folks who can be that buffer. Doesn't necessarily have to be security.
And thank you for that, because I was hesitant to mention security because, like, that's not where people feel comfortable oftentimes. But like what you just mentioned, it's like, hey, if you've been around and you saw there was a booth for, like you said, an anti-violence kind of booth, or even if it's a, like, hey, it's your therapist's office or whoever, any kind of booth that you feel comfortable going to, you can just go and hang out there and, and have that be a de-escalating place to be.
Your community organizations, those booths are great places to do that because they're used to providing support.
Absolutely. That. And I know, Christina, you had mentioned also, like, checking out the prides that are like 10, 30 miles away, if you have transportation options, if you know that someone is going to be at Pride in this event, you could choose to go to a different event. Or if you think somebody is trying to find you at Pride events, going to ones in different places, or ones that, like, that person wouldn't expect you to be at, might be a way to kind of still get to participate in things, but have a little bit more safety.
Yeah.
Is there more, Christina, you wanted to add there?
Just a random thought just popped into my head, because one of the ways that I help myself relax when I'm at these events and such is to drop a pin wherever my transportation is, so that I know all of the ways to get back there in case I get separated from my party. Because technology has become such a help in that area. As long as I've got that pin, I always know where my people are going to end up back.
I love that.
So that takes a lot of the stress off of being out and around people. Just knowing where the exits to the grounds are. That is super helpful, because I have a little bit of paranoid and agoraphobia things going on. So knowing where the exits are at all times, whether I'm in a restaurant or a shopping center or a park, it's vital for me. And these are all things that we can do for ourselves just to help ourselves relax and have a good time.
Absolutely. And that really makes me think about, like, when we're stressed out, when we're having trauma responses or in a crisis, it can be harder to remember things. So, like, if your phone is safe, dropping a pen in it means you don't have to, like, keep remembering where your transportation is. For instances where, like, phone isn't safe technology to share that information, like writing it down even and keeping it in your pocket. Keeping phone numbers or exits in your pocket, like, that way you don't, and at least for me, I don't have to keep being like, okay, we're going to this exit, or like it's at this cross street or whatever in my head, because I'm going to forget that. And that takes energy that I just don't have. Love it.
Well, and that makes a good point, that just because the Pride festivals are smaller doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be less stressful. Because, like, for me, I know Milwaukee well. I lived in Milwaukee for a long time. I've been all over Milwaukee. I've worked in every nightclub that has drag queens in Milwaukee. These smaller towns, I don't know these smaller towns. I don't know my way around. I don't know the people. I'm not going to feel quite as comfortable in that way, and so much more comfortable in other ways. So it's always weigh the benefits versus the stress, because, that's not good. It's just not good.
Absolutely.
There's somebody posted, I think, a comment, and it reminded me of something that I've done a lot too, which is to, like, if you drove to an event, to take a picture of, like, a cross street where your car is, because you forget, you get anxious, you might drink, you don't remember where your car is. Hopefully you're not going to drive after you've had some drinks, but you then at least can go back and look at your phone and go, oh yeah, that's where I parked. That's what I do almost every time I drive to the airport. It's like, by the time I get back from my trip, like, what lane did I park in? So if I have that picture, it's kind of like dropping a pin. It's like, then I don't have to worry about trying to keep it in my head all the time. So that can be really useful.
Yeah. There's one last thing I wanted to bring up, just in terms of, like, getting the most out of Pride, which for me is wearing a mask. And not everybody is able to wear masks for, lots of different health considerations. But I know I personally, like, if I'm in a crowd, even outdoors. If I'm indoors, definitely I'm going to wear a mask. And that is a way that I'm like gentle with myself and I take care of myself. Whether it's COVID or cold, like I don't need to get sick from being gay. And celebrating Pride, and it helps like take care of other people. It shows to people, you know, that we're thinking about inclusion. And I mean, I'm kind of spoiled. I've loved masking because like people don't see half of my face anymore. And so if there are situations where like, you know, there are protesters who are taking pictures or like anything like that, wearing a mask helps protect your identity and your privacy in ways. If you're going to have to like stop at a gas station and use a gendered bathroom and that feels gross, like sometimes wearing a mask can help people to not pick up on some of, you know, to like sort you into the bathroom that you're using. So there's like, in addition to like the contagion helpfulness of masking, it can help in other ways for folks who, you know, are physically able to wear masks. And that helps people who can't wear masks attend to stuff. It makes it safer for everybody. So, you know, that's another thing that I for sure think about. Anything else you two want to add about getting the most out of Pride, safety planning, celebrating queerness, getting to play with gender?
You know, on the topic of being gentle with ourselves, and this, I'll be brief with this. We're not always going to get to do all of the things we want to do. And we can be really hard on ourselves if we don't make it to all of the things we expected ourselves to. I really wanted to see a couple of concerts at Pride this year that started at like 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock. But 8 o'clock hit, and I was like, I need to go home. I'm tired. I'm done. I can't do anymore. And I didn't force myself to stay because I knew that I needed to take care of me. Sometimes taking care of us needs to take priority over the fun stuff. And it's okay if we don't get to do all of the things. There's always going to be more things than another thing.
Yes.
You know, and that ties into a couple of things that I had jotted down before we started, which is, you know, kind of around our physical needs. It's like, you know, hey, if it's 8 o'clock and you're tired and you need to go home, you know, like, yeah, go home. If you're not feeling well, don't go. You know, it's like, that's okay. There's going to be a next year or a next Pride. You know, some of the things I was thinking about too, like in terms of like how we prepare, so much of our world right now is so capitalistic, and it's like, you know, can you bring a bottle of water into a Pride event? You know, sometimes you have to go through a security gate or you have to pay money, and, you know, can you bring a water bottle that's empty in, or can you bring one that's full in? Because like a lot of people don't have $5 to spend to get a bottle of water, but it's really important when it's 80 degrees out to have water. So it's kind of like, you know, do you know what the rules are again? And can you find a way, you know, maybe somebody is giving away free swag that's a water bottle. Well, can you use that and go to a water fountain and fill it up? Those kinds of things to try to make sure that, you know, your needs, your physical needs get taken care of. And, you know, Chris, you mentioned one thing earlier about like, you know, what you wore to Pride this year, you know, like, damn girl, like, yeah, like, you go, you know, wear shorts, wear comfortable shoes. And I think a lot of times for trans folks, we want to wear things that affirm our gender. I mean, like we all want to wear things that make us feel comfortable, either about our gender or about whatever else. But, you know, it's hot usually in the summer. Usually people do Pride in June. Sometimes it's other months in other places. But, you know, do we need to wear a hat sometimes? Does that either help affirm our gender or does it kind of take away? Can we go without wearing a binder because we have to wear like 5 shirts on top of it? Or can we choose to find another way to express ourselves so that we don't get overheated and then the medics get called or we have to go home early? What about our footwear? You know, it's like, yeah, I really love wearing those, you know, big high-heeled boots, but like, am I going to be able to walk easily among crowds? Are they going to be too hot? You know, I mean, like all of those kinds of things of like, how can we be our fullest and best and funnest self, but also like not get overheated, not trip on things, all of those kind of safety risks, but also about like what's our body like. And kind of making some balance between the two things. Like maybe if we have the money, we can buy those fancy Converse sneakers that are all pridey colored and wear those instead of the sexy boots that we want to wear or whatever. So I mean, there can be some shake up with it. So I encourage people to think about those kinds of things. I did have a couple of other things that we could talk about too, but we don't have to.
Go for it.
Huh.
Let's do
Go for it.
5 to 10 more minutes.
So these are other things that are kind of about our body and our mind. And, you know, it's kind of like, I guess a lot of the things that I thought about were really about preparing ahead of time. So like, does being around people tire you out or does it give you energy? And so kind of planning accordingly, like, you know, it's okay to go to Pride and stay for an hour or a half an hour if that fulfills you, or if you want to stay for 6 hours, that's great. You know, I mean, like kind of knowing what energizes you and what feels good is sometimes a really important thing. You know, we were talking about trauma before. I don't think we talked very much about like the loud noises that are sometimes at Pride. I know for me personally, that's one of the things that is the most kind of irritating because I'm one of those people that doesn't like a lot of stimulus. So, you know, is there always going to be music? So Chris, like you mentioned that like concerts sometimes start at 9 or 11 at night. Well, maybe it's better to go, if you like the quiet, to go at noon if something is like not so loud. So, you know, it might be another one of those places where we want to think about, do we want to bring earplugs or figure out if we need to go wait in our car for a while, or, you know, can we just lean into the noise and say, okay, it's going to be really loud. I'm going to go with it for 15 minutes. If I can't stand it, I'm going to go. You know, so some of those kind of things. Or Emil, you mentioned like Seattle has, you know, kind of a sensory down zone. I'm not sure do they have a name for their kind of?
I was told Spoonie tent. Again, didn't from someone I didn't look at Seattle's website to see the official term.
Yeah.
And,
but those places are great, right? If there's a designated place to have it be quieter or have some things to touch or just be calm.
Now I just want to go hang out in that tent.
Right, exactly.
Seriously, Pride organizers, get it together. More Spoonie tents.
Yes.
We got a comment, and this year I did shorts and a tank top. In my mind, I was worried beforehand. And when I got there, it was so easy. Such a mind shift. And I love that, you know, we've been giving additional examples, but like really that mind shift, I think noticing that can be so healing. Of, you know, take a moment to see like what's feeling good and right and joyful. Even when there is like stress and tension and other black, if that's there, like, wow, I had a mind shift, or like I felt comfortable, or you know what, I left when I needed to. Like celebrate those things and notice them, and that can be a part of healing and taking care of ourselves.
Such a great point, because I had for a long time the tendency to put on Pride for others instead of making it about being at Pride for me and filling me up, which I think is, you know, one of the greatest things about Pride is just going and getting filled back up and getting the strength to, you know, carry it out into the world. So, just scaling back and allowing ourselves to just be us and to celebrate the way we need to or want to. It's brilliant.
You know, this is a tangent, but like, you know, Emil, you made a comment earlier about kind of like reminding other Pride organizers or reminding other organizations kind of some of the things that they can do. And I was thinking that, you know, when we have done Pride as an organization, we always do like kind of customized t-shirts every year. And we always try to make t-shirts in dark colors for the folks that may feel that they want or need to bind, so that they can do so without like, their binders showing, or without, or to not wear binders, because we have black t-shirts or dark colored t-shirts. So like, I'm not telling people that they should make, all your t-shirts dark, but like think about that or offer that as an option so that people can be comfortable and not overheated in a t-shirt that your organization is making. So, and I mean, those are like those little simple things that sometimes we don't think about ahead of time. Or if we have a dress code for people, does that affect who wants to volunteer, who wants to be there because they don't feel comfortable or safe in certain, clothes or whatever.
Yeah.
And before we close, I do want to talk about that. Yep, go ahead. Sorry, Emil.
A couple comments, but real quick on the t-shirts, 2 points of like, one, finding places to volunteer for and help staff their table is another great way to like get the most out of Pride, especially for those of us who really like having something to do and a purpose. Mm-hmm. It can be an easy way, and it might get you free entry to places where the big festival does charge. Not everywhere charges. I've been thinking a lot about black t-shirts. This is a big tangent. Like almost all of mine are black, and it's way too hot, but it hides the sweat. And I've just decided that like people can see my sweat stains, and everybody sweats, and like let's just, this is a experiment for me, and just like being comfortable with the ways our body works. Not that everybody needs to, and those are great reasons, Michael, to have darker shirts. And
exactly, yeah.
If you wear a lighter shirt because it's cooler and you're covered in sweat, like great, I'm there with you.
Go for it, right? Yep.
And then from the comments, we got Portland Pride has a quiet area and a grassy, shady spot. And Philadelphia also has a low stimulation zones, side street throughout with shade and quiet. And then another just like celebration of Pride. I love seeing other trans men with their shirts off and smiles on their faces, which is a great way to, celebrating the other folks that are there is another good way.
Trans joy is so beautiful.
Hey, before we close, I would love to talk a little bit about touch and sex at Pride, if we can, because we're talking about like being there. And, Pride is oftentimes really crowded. So sometimes there's a lot of touching that happens that's not like intentional, like grabbing, touching, but like just because there's a lot of people are bumping into each other. And that can be really something like just to be aware of ahead of time, right? That knowing that it might be crowded or that you might be touching each other. And again, kind of figuring out if you want to make a plan around that or not, or like if you want to stay around the edges of things, or figuring out where you want to be in things. And sometimes like you want to lean into it, right? It's kind of like, oh, hey, we're all in this together, and I know I'm going to be touched. I'm going to get mentally prepared for that, but we're going to be in this cramped space, and we're going to be dancing together. We're going to be like doing whatever, and that's cool. So like there can be this both planning as well as celebrating that ability to just say, okay, we're going to do like the mosh pit thing or whatever the cool kids are doing now. I don't know what it is, but like, to be fun and playful with it. But sometimes we don't want to be touched. So like, I've thought a lot about like, we have a right to say to people, hey, like, don't touch me. I don't want to be touched, or don't touch my t-shirt just because you like it. And we have a right to say that. And it's really hard to do that. And I know sometimes it's really great if we can practice with our friends ahead of time and say, hey, can we practice saying like, no, I don't want you to touch my t-shirt. You can say it looks great, but don't touch me about it. So, a lot of that is just kind of like helping that muscle memory of like, it's okay to say no. It's okay to set those boundaries. And we can practice and do that. I'm wondering if y'all have any ideas about like kind of helping folks if they feel like, hey, I don't want to be touched, or people are trying to touch me and that's not cool, or it is cool, or how to navigate those situations.
Well, I was just thinking about the different ways that we end up being touched at Pride. I mean, I don't like being touched by strangers. I have PTSD. It triggers a reaction in my body. I don't love it. But I happened into the dance pavilion, and I call it the early bird dance party because they were playing music for Gen X, and we just all got in there and started doing our 90s dance moves. Picture 29 Linda Belchers, and that was great. We were bumping into each other. That touching was fine, but just like 50 yards away in the Health and Wellness Center, there was a religious organization grabbing people and asking if they wanted blessings, and I did not respond well to that kind of touching. So it's okay to be okay with one kind of touching and not the other. We don't have to justify ourselves with that.
Yeah. And again, like those feelings also change in the moment. Like you may not expect to be okay with one kind, and then you are when it happens. But thinking ahead and practicing can be really helpful if you struggle with saying no or back off or anything like that. I also, want to like give the reminder that unfortunately some folks still need to hear of like the way people dress is never an invitation to touch them. And unfortunately we do see that sometimes of people thinking that somebody not wearing a lot of clothing or wearing really fabulous extravagant clothing is a right to touch, and it's not. And like ask on the dance floor, ask in a crowd, can I touch you? Do you want to dance up on each other? Do you want to make out? Do you want to like go have sex somewhere? Like, so what if it feels awkward? Like it's fun. It's a great way to get consent is by communicating clearly, and really paying attention to the cues the other person gives you. And sometimes we can't hear each other well, when we're dancing. So we might want to make sure that there's clear consent in other ways, like, hand gestures to show, can we dance together? Like, what are you asking? And checking in throughout, seeing if vibes change. But, that's another way to like get the most out of it. If you're nervous, if you want Pride to be a sexy time for you and you're nervous about that, like again, embrace the awkward and the potential silliness of it, of just being like, hey, maybe this is a like question you don't get every day, but do you want to dance something together? Like, is this a flirting thing? Can we be flirting now? Like, whatever that is, can be helpful too. So both sides, like we need to be checking with others for consent and like think ahead about your boundaries and what support you need to express your boundaries.
That's a great point, because these festivals and this collective euphoria can really get us to sometimes forget where we are. And that second to pause and make sure we have consent, because not everybody's going to be where we are. That's right.
Amelia, you were kind of making the segue into the last thing that I really was hoping to talk about, which is that Pride can be a really sex positive event. And I am not making any comments about whether we should be having public sex or not. Y'all can make your own risk assessment about whatever, but it's a great place to be exploratory with consent with folks. So it's like, hey, I think you're really cute. Do you want to go and, sit on the bench over here and we'll talk? And if that leads to something else, we can get consent and move on. So it's like, I think it's a great place for people to want to be sexy with each other, to be sexual with each other, and we can come prepared for that. So, we can know if we're, taking PrEP or not. We can bring some barriers if we want and need. We can do lots of those things to be prepared to have a good time sexually. If we want, make sure that we have lube. Usually there's lube given away everywhere at Pride. So like a lot of times you don't even have to bring it, but you could bring it so you're ready. But, if you usually wear a packer to have sex, like, do you want to bring that with you? Or, like some of those things of like, this is a celebratory space. And again, making your own risk assessment about what's public or not public or whatever. But, that can be a really fun part of Pride for folks, is to be able to express that part of themselves as well as the other things that come out of Pride. So, because, I wanted to bring it up because I'm normally the fuddy-dud that's like, all depressed and like, let's plan, let's safety plan, let's do all these good things. But it can be fun. It can be fun to have sex at Pride or to flirt at Pride. And it's even more fun when we get consent and we have the tools that we need to protect ourselves and to protect each other.
Absolutely.
It's so funny to me that you said that about barriers and lube being handed out, because I didn't even realize until 3 days after I got home that I now have condoms and lube, because I don't know where they came from, but I have them.
Right.
Yeah, they just magically show up at Pride. It's great.
I mean, yay. Emergency stash.
Yes. I mean, like, we might get a year's worth of condoms going to Pride, and condoms are expensive, or dental dams are expensive, or lube's expensive. Like, just, people have stuff on their tables. It's free. Enjoy that. And
give it
take
away to your
in.
friends. Promote safe sex.
Exactly. Or pick up, information about PrEP and share that with your friends, or share that with you. So, like, there's a lot of things that we can either, kind of get for free and use ourselves, or share with others. Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. I know, Michael, you said you had a few topics.
That was it. I wanted to end with sex, but if you want to end with something else, we can end with something else. But
that's how our Pride is going to end, with sex, y'all.
And then next week we'll talk about, like, Pride at home or Pride in other ways. You could still have sex at home too, but
Yeah. So thank you all. I loved our comments and conversation today. Next week is kind of, there's no right way to do Pride, so we're going to talk a lot about what I told one of my friends was being gay at home, but it's really just like, how do we celebrate Pride for those of us that don't go to events? All sorts of different ways to bring Pride into our lives. And then our last one in July will be about building community. We also, this came up some today, in July and August, and we'll get it advertised soon. We're having another series of Defend Yourself workshops. And that is an empowerment self-defense strategy. So, when we were talking about like practicing setting those boundaries, thinking through your boundaries, and really, acknowledging the stuff we do to take care of ourselves and defend ourselves. That is a great series of workshops that will be free to folks. So keep an eye out for those and sign up for them. Come back next week. And I want to plug a book. I was like thinking about public sex. It just reminded me of this book, Park Cruising, that I read recently, which really, like, I feel like I've been pro cruising for a long time, but like helped me really think about like the policies and logistics and like how we like structure our world. And so that was a great one. If anybody is having some like public sex feelings, that could be a really interesting read to get more insights into it. And with that, I think we're closing. Any last comments? Great. Thank you, everyone. Happy Pride. This was so much fun, and we'll see you next week.
Happy, everybody.